Hi everyone, I'm Manny Varela, the Business Relationship Manager at DevOps Institute. Welcome to the Bringing Agility to Your Service Management Team and Process webinar with Suresh GP. Just some background information here. Again, Jayne is unable to attend, but she is the board member and co-founder of DevOps Institute, president of ITSM Academy, active trainer, scrum master, former IT director, and author of the Agile Service Management Guide. Suresh GP is globally known and respected and is the managing director of TaUB Solutions from Singapore and India. Regional leader in business relationship management, has over 16 plus years of experience in ITSM, governance, Agile, DevOps, and BRM. And he's a certified Agile Service Manager, ITIL expert, Prince 2, certified Agile process owner as well. So the DevOps Institute is the continuous learning community for emerging DevOps practices. DOI's enterprise-grade DevOps education, training, and certification is delivered worldwide through our registered educational partners. In partnership with PeopleCert, a recognized global leader in IT examination and certifications. And TaUB Solutions specializes in gamification, training, consulting, implementation services of Agile, DevOps, ITSM, BRM, and governance, with offices in Singapore and India. We've planned for some time at the end of this presentation to answer a few questions from those in attendance. So please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar app to submit your questions. So to assist Suresh in understanding the demographics of today's audience, we've compiled a few questions for a quick poll. So I'll present the poll here, and if you could participate, that would be greatly appreciated. I will start the first poll right now. So, Rich, what region do you represent currently with your attendance? Share. So, Suresh, it looks like the majority are from the Asian region, some in Europe and a few in North and South America. I will present the next poll next. At what stage is your implementation of Agile software development? It looks like we've got quite across the board here coming up, so it's very nice. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm closing the poll, and I'm going to share it. So it looks like 33% there, Suresh, have not started, 25, and it looks like halfway through and fully implemented about 25% each, and planned for this year, 17%. So good mix there. And
yeah, that's right.
I'll present one more here. Last polling question. What is your level of DevOps adoption? Exploring opportunities, foundation level, implementing some DevOps best practices, fully adopted DevOps across the organization. And I will close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Suresh, so it looks like many are exploring the opportunities, some good foundation level. Some have implemented DevOps practices, which is great. It doesn't look like many have at this point fully adopted DevOps. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight as to what the attendees are doing out there at the moment. And at this point, I will hand it to Suresh to make a presentation for the Agile Service Management.
Thank you, Manny. Thanks everybody for joining in today, and really appreciate you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks so much for taking time in spite of your busy schedule. I know in India it's about 7:30, all completing the work and doing. I really appreciate it. So what we're going to do is to start with some of the myths around service management towards Agile. The first thing for me that really appealed was ITIL built for waterfall is the first myth. In a sense, it was because we're talking about from version 1 to version 3 in 2011, where predominantly waterfall was the way to go forward, right? And things have changed dramatically after 2011, right? And there's so much of things happening in the ecosystem, be it service integration and management, the Agile, Lean, DevOps, and whatnot. So the question that we need to ask in terms of ITIL version 3, is it still relevant to the Agile way of working? And if not, how can you make these processes adapted to be more agile to underpin a faster flow of work, right? So the aspect of adopt and adapt is something that is very critical in today's business. And having a lot of conversations with C-level audience today, I see this is much more critical to the service management aspect as well. So let's explore in this webinar about how is Agile adaptable to service management context. I know in the poll questions that we asked, we focused on Agile software development to get a feeler, because I think predominantly we all associate Agile with software development. Now we need to really look at whether Agile is something scalable as well as applicable in service management context. So let's go on to that. But the myth is, we need to move away. ITIL was built, but it can still be adaptable to the Agile way of working. So that's my first start on the myth. The second one is I have a lot of conversations when we do these DevOps courses and other stuff. People say, is it something really related with service management? So this is from the DevOps handbook, as you know, from Jayne Kim and the rest of the authors who have put in across. I had the good fortune to meet Jayne Kim last year in the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and I definitely recommend everybody to go through this DevOps handbook. What the authors mention is ITIL has broadly influenced multiple generations of ops practitioners. When you talk about ops, we are talking about production support, database, network, storage administrators, and system administrators, into a library of practices to codify process and practices that underpin world-class IT operations. Don't get me wrong, ITIL has been the key factor, for us to, from an operations standpoint of it, we've been so much good in terms of doing incident problem change, configuration management. We're good at it, right? But what happens in the context of DevOps? How does it change gears? Do we still follow the same standard change management processes with the change advisory board and follow the release cycle, or does it change? Well, the matter of the fact is service management will have to also evolve with DevOps, and that's something that brings in how do we adapt to the changing landscape of Agile, Lean, and DevOps practices.
So Suresh,
we all know that.
Suresh, in follow-up to that, what has been your experience with clients around the need for agility in service management?
Well, that's a great question, Manny. And I'll tell to the fact that a lot of our customers, primarily in India and Singapore, that we are dealing with, the first question that we get more often from the service delivery managers, account representatives is, how are my existing service management processes going to change? Like we talk about people, process, product, partners, but how do you bring those quick improvements in terms of sprints? Is it really doable? So the problem is, from a product development standpoint, you can have a tangible outcome in terms of UI that you can actually give it as a prototype. But in a service management context, it's the backbone. It's something that is not visible. So the question people ask is, how do you bring that just enough process? And on the other day, I was having a discussion where people are saying that, do we need to have change advisory board meetings once a week, or is it going to be more repetitive? Because gone are the days that we did deployments once a week or once in 2 weeks or a month. We are talking about daily deployments and talking about Amazon talking about 11 deployments every 11.6 seconds. So with that kind of a change, do we have your CAB meeting regularly, or it is something going to be much more frequent? So people want to really know, Manny, that how is it being adaptable to the environment? Is it simply something to be doable? Can we apply Scrum practices? Can we look at Kanban boards? So there's a lot of questions, and there's no perfect answer. So they want to really look at and ask for practitioners like us to see how they implement it. So based on our CASM and other learnings, we are now consulting a few organizations who have been following traditional waterfall methodology and just started gears to Agile. We are helping them to build just enough process. So yeah, very much in the radar with the new trends of adaptability to DevOps and the new landscape.
Great, thank you.
And we know all about services. Services is means of delivering value. So it's about value, outcome, cost, and risk. I get the familiar with Paul Wilkinson always talking about the 4 things, VOCR. Unfortunately, we don't measure these 4 parameters when it comes to service. We still measure about how was the training, how was the faculty, how was the food, but who measures the transfer skills? Are we really delivering the value? So in the digital era, and I was in last week, I was in the digital transformation conference. It's all about what is the value from a consumer perspective, the consumerization perspective. We are into an instant gratification world. How quickly can we actually get these stuff done without, in a much more readily consumable format? So services have to be redefined, and today we see everything is in an app, and it's all on the fly on a subscription model, everything moving on to cloud, digitization. So until we do our services that are delivering value, it's actually going to be instantly out of the race. So it's becoming increasingly important to deliver just enough processes and stuff to do that. So the services are remaining the same, but the way the value is actually changing. The value parameter is changing over a period of time. So it's very specific to look at how is it to be adaptable to this growing demand. So if you look at the definition of Agile, and it is really not about doing something Agile. It's about thinking Agile. Can we really think out of the box? Or can we really break away from the legacy systems and think something that is possible in a service management context? Traditionally, I'll take the onus as well. I've been a service management practitioner for the last 16 years. We are very good in robust processes. We tell that this is how things to be done. If your change is not sent out within a weeks before, then we are not going to accept it in the CAB meeting. And we have a lot of rigorous processes and post-implementation review and stuff like that. Now, can we break down that part to think something different, something quickly, and then figure it out? That's really what Agile is talking about. And our customers' requirements are keeping on changing and dynamically moving on to Internet of Things, digital transformation. A service management process is also scalable with that kind of a pace, right? Is it still doable? And that's the question that we have to think about it. I mean, it's all about more to think Agile before even you do Agile, right? And that's a paradigm shift that we see in a lot of our organizations, as well as meeting a lot of these partner ecosystem as well. So what does it mean for your organizations to be Agile? And nothing beats the Agile Manifesto. And Agile Manifesto, as you know, was originally coming away from the software development area. But these aspects very much fit into the realm of service management as well. So instead of blindly going on processes and tools, which we always follow about incident problem change, is it really working? On the other day, I was talking to a customer, and he said, what is the process which is much more neglected in your organization? Guess what? It was change management process, because it's very bureaucratic. You have an RFC form, which is so much of details. You don't have so much details to provide if you are a change initiator. So why can't you have just enough information that I can actually fill it across and then shoot it up for approval? So if someone is not following a process, we need to understand why they are not following process. What is the real rationale of doing that? So it all boils down to individuals and interaction. Gone are the days that we have sophisticated RACI metrics and comprehensive guides. I know a lot of people talked about it. Is it really working? Most of the times your process guides are even not refurbished. It's continuing with the same kind of image and roles and racy metrics, which is sometimes not even relevant. And your release policy for that matter, it used to have major release, minor release, that might not be relevant in this today's context, because every day there are much more releases. So are we changing that part? So it all boils down to, is it working to the efficiency of your consumer, be it your internal or external or anybody who's the ecosystem to do that? And we have all strong contracts, service level agreements. And I recollect what Barclay used to say, it's all about the watermelon syndrome, right? All your SLAs are all really green. I've never seen a service provider today who says that, we are in red and stuff. Everybody is doing well, don't get me wrong, everybody is doing really good. But then when you do a customer satisfaction survey or net promoter score, it is bleeding red, right? The watermelon, when you open it up, it's bleeding red. The customer's bleeding. So what it really mentions is that you're measuring the wrong SLAs. It's not business level agreements. So there is a gap, right? And at the end of the day, if you don't really adjust that, it's going to fail miserably across, right? So and people say that this is what we follow. So it's always about following the plan. Well, you have to change gears. People are just looking at doing everything on a digital format. So while there's value on the right, it all boils down to, are we making your processes, your tools, your service management things really making sense to this generation of people, or to these set of consumers that we are talking about? So it's very important for all of us in service management to take cognizance of the fact that the Agile Manifesto is just not for software development, but very much relevant and to embark in your journey towards bringing agility in service management, right? At this moment, do you have any questions, Nani?
Yes, I do. I do have one from Daniel. If we are supposed to deliver something every 2 weeks, Agile Scrum, how then does the SLA still provide value, or is it even required any longer?
That's a great question, Daniel. Now, the first question is, your SLAs and contracts are going to remain the same, right? What we are trying to talk about here is the continual service improvement. And if you remember those discussions we had, the CSA register and other stuff, but then what's the value that you can showcase to the business, to the organization, that says that you're moving across? We used to have the service improvement plans that used to have a longer cycle, and by the time you see something visible, it's already lost. So the intent behind the sprints is, within the 2-week sprint or 4-week sprint, you are showing something very tangible in terms of process efficiency, operational savings, and stuff like that, that we are able to visualize and get the value and then move on. So it's much more tangible from that particular perspective. So your SLAs and contracts still remain the same, because it's a long contract to do that, but how quickly you're adapting to the changing demand and other stuff, that really matters in the context of service management. Hope that answers Daniel's question. Okay, let's move on. Now, the questions that we need to address, if you need to know if you are really to explore whether agile service management is really relevant. It's not about racy metrics. We talked about responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, but you see there's a lot of gray line between two people. People say, I don't want to take this one. This is not part of my job responsibilities. This is someone else does that. So how do you know that you're doing good? We said that we followed the processes, we met the SLAs, but how are you going to improve your day-to-day efficiency of processes? How to minimize the bottlenecks? How do you minimize wastages? How do you minimize communication failures? How do you measure in terms of whether you're doing good or not? And how can you improve? We all start with a CSA plan, register. Where do you begin? And how do you leverage technology, right? And the last question that you need to ask is, if you're doing this now, what's the current situation? And if you do something different, how would it matter to someone? Your internal customers, your external, your partners. How is the business going to perceive things? And that's the question that you need to ask. What's going to change by the way people are going to perceive the value of service management? Many of the times when I talk to organizations, it's amazing. People say that service management is an integral part of it, but is keeping the lights on the only thing? I don't see. Because just keeping the lights on, operations running is not the key. What kind of additional value that you're able to provide? So we are talking about predictive analytics. We are talking about proactive monitoring. We are talking about ability to quickly detect and give information for them to make decisions, right? So it's a question of really trying to probe within your organization. What does that really require for you to jump into a journey of it? Remember the golden circle, right? If you don't have the why part, why are we trying to drive this? What's the intent behind that? You're going to fail miserably. So instead of just jumping on it's another bandwagon, I would normally request you to think about, why do you think agile service management would make sense? Who are your business users? What are you trying to achieve? And that's a good starting point for you to have a dialogue with the business and start then talking about it. I was talking the other day with some of the people. They said the proposals today from the customers are asking, how can you make service management agile? So that's the need of the hour from every aspect of the ecosystem, saying, are you changing gears with a new way of DevOps, lean, and digital transformation? So think about it for a while and see whether you are into that journey, right? So what's agile service management? And I'm not going to read through it, and it's for you to read through it. You need to still remember the service management processes to exist, but then it doesn't reflect agile values, right? In terms of, is the customer, are you able to adapt to the new change? Are you able to deliver much more value? Are you able to measure in terms of quick value, in terms of demonstrations, observations, and stuff like that? So you reflect all the agile values, Agile Manifesto principles to have just enough. What is just enough? It could depend on your organization. Do I need to have just enough processes that I can build in that is sufficient enough for people to go through the change management process? You don't need to have 3 to 4 levels of process workflows. It could be a simple workflow: change initiation, review, approval, implement, and closure. It could be as simple as that. And then you can slowly start expanding on it. So then people start understanding the rationales behind doing this. So look at how does it add value to the customer and how does it deliver outcomes, right? So adapt your practices to process design. So you could be either you do process design and process improvement. So if it's a green field, you can talk about designing your own processes, or it could be the aspect of improving. You have an existing processes which is actually very cumbersome, very bureaucratic. You just need to stop it off and then start from scratch. So just try to break down into pieces so that it's much more consumable. People are not overwhelmed. I've had a lot of conversations where people say, oh my gosh, this change management process is pretty cumbersome, pretty bureaucratic. Can we have something a simplified way? Remember, simplification means that we have to think a lot. Recollecting Albert Einstein, the matter of knowing your prowess of your knowledge is not just talking about, if you're able to explain to a 5-year-old what you think, that's where your real knowledge lies across. So that's the simplification is the most important aspect. And I couldn't overemphasize of the value of how we can make it simple so that everybody understands the rationale and then adopt to it rather than making it so bureaucratic, so fine-tuned in castle that nobody starts following it across, right? So that's the aspect in which agile service management. So you see a lot of pillars around. You need to have lean, so object of delivering value by improving the flow and removing the bottlenecks and wastages. Looking at ITIL as the core, where we have the service management processes. Apply agile using Scrum, where you have sprints, you have process backlog. So the product backlog in a typical situation will change to a process backlog. And you have Kanban boards where we can define to-do list, work in progress. So we can do all of those stuff. So it's a kind of an integral of a conglomeration of these best practices, frameworks, and methodologies to actually start delivering value. Remember, Agile Service Management does not redefine service management process. So you still have your incident problem change there, but the way it's being projected and fine-tuned, that's where the real crux is. So if you look at the service management and we look at the left one side as the waterfall way of looking, where you had goals, objectives, policies, roles, CSF, blah, blah, blah. And it went to that. It was a straight waterfall method of where we define a process rollout, roadmap for any kind of working. So it was a kind of a linear model, if I could just relate to the way we have been traditionally doing service management. Now with the Agile Service Management, we are going to have a backlog, which is a process backlog. And this could be something like a CSA register feeding into a process backlog, right? So instead of product backlog, we can say, we need to make this change so that there's no multiple approvals. It's much more easy to approve. That could be a process backlog. And then you do a 2-week sprint and then release that particular feature or the process so that it's delivering value, right? So you're talking about breaking down into pieces, looking at the priority items. So you will probably prioritize your process backlog, what is very important, and then you look at this one and then release that particular increment, right? So you know exactly at the end of 2 weeks, what are you going to get and how is you're going to take it forward on that. So we have something like a process planning meeting that can look at the entire year. What are you going to do that in terms of releases, and then take a specific thing and look into your sprint backlog and try to drive across. So the key message is you don't go into sequence, but you do it parallelly, come up with quick wins, and then showcase value so that the business as well as the team are able to embrace the change more often. Any questions at this moment, Manny?
Sure. I've got a few of them. In the slide on Be Agile, I do believe extreme of either left or right may be not healthy. How do you then ensure midway taking best of both sides?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? I mean, when you're talking about something to do in Agile, right, it's not supposed to be perfect, right? You start something and you need to strike the balance. You cannot just we still need to exist because you have legacy systems and stuff like that. We typically Gartner talks about bimodal IT, so you cannot just make Agile everywhere to do that. So but you can make that stepwise improvements. Do it something that is much better than the earlier one, and it slowly start gaining momentum and do that. So it's absolutely okay to live with something which is half good and okay, but then you start getting to that groove, and once you get to the groove, it just starts improving across. So absolutely, you have to live with what you have, make those small changes, and slowly get this adaptability to do that. So it has to be kind of a dual way of working across. You cannot just have a perfect solution one fine morning and say that we will all follow Agile. It is not going to work across.
Great. Another quick question. Do ITSM tools like ServiceNow and BMC support Agile ways?
Well, I want to make this talk as a more tool agnostic one, but yeah, there's a lot of tools in the market that are adapting to an Agile way of working. For example, Jira. So we have Kanban boards, we have sprints that you can actually have it. You can apply Scrum way of working to do that. So it's all kind of aligned. And in fact, most of the tools today, all your sophisticated tools, next-gen tools, have already adopted Agile way of working. So absolutely, it wouldn't make any sense without having your tools work in the way to do that. In fact, when we are doing our courses on Certified Agile Service Manager, we expose people to some of the tools to see how they can look at your process backlog. How is it assigned? How do you determine your velocity? Yeah, very much. So I think, yeah, to answer the question, yes, a lot of the tools in the market have provisions to have Agile. So you need to ask and leverage those modules to embrace that particular way of working.
Thank you, Suresh.
Right. So we are into an aspect of thing, and this comes to the question that you asked, Manny. Can we have it half-baked? Yeah, it can. So continue to do. Identify an opportunity. It could be a small opportunity that we are trying to pace it out and see how it works. Understand outcomes. At the end of the day, it's all about outcome and value that we are trying to achieve for your end customer. It could be your internal, it could be external, and there could be a lot of solutions, right? And typically, you can have it in-house. You can do a consultant to do that, or you can have a training, people put into a training and tell them how it works. It could be various things, right? But at the end of the day, you need to look at how do we work with solutions? How do we be part of it? So even if you're trying to outsource the entire stuff, how can you be a part of it? Because until you are kind of be a part of the journey, and that's one of the things I like about Agile is you're a self-organizing team. You don't really require someone to come there and monitor you. You know exactly how things are working. You take that particular part and improve yourself, deploy and measure. So it's a kind of a PDCA if you can do it. But then you have to get that in a very small chunks and then show some improvements and do that. In fact, in our organization, in our things, we're kind of a startup. We put out our Kanban boards and stand-up meeting notes to do that. So get it as simple as possible. Don't make it very complex. You can take it with the stick-on notes to start something, put it into the whiteboard, look at that, and then start your journey. So it's all about inspecting and adapting, to do that. So that's the empirical approach which Scrum talks about, and continue to do that. And it's from scrum.org. Continue to do until you become happy with that. So it's a journey. It's just not tomorrow you start on this journey and then tomorrow you say that, well, I did that, Agile failed. It never fails. It's that we didn't understand how to make it work. So that's the important aspect that you need to keep in mind when you drive these conversations, right? So how does it look? This is just a quick snapshot of how does Agile works and what's the difference between Scrum in a software development area towards a service management area. So there are a couple of differences. One is here you have the process owner. In service management, we call this as a product owner, the owner of the product backlog. Then we have the team here. The team could be your incident manager, problem manager, change manager, whoever is there as part of the process analyst and other stuff. Instead of the Scrum Master, we call someone as an Agile Service Manager. So he's a guy who's typically a service manager who's overseeing a lot of processes, and they are trying to change the way we adopt to Agile. So Agile Service Manager, again, has a lot of hands-on experience on driving service management projects, and he's going to be like a coach, right? And that's what we expect on a Scrum Master, because Scrum Master is a kind of a technical guy who understands where the bottlenecks are there and tries to help them people to improve the whole set of offering, right? So Agile Service Manager is a change. And you look at this one, it's not a product backlog, it's going to be a process backlog, right? And we are talking about a process increment. So instead of a product backlog, we are going to use a process backlog. But then underlying user stories, the way of working is going to be the same, right? And we are going to talk about process design and minimum viable process. If you are well versed with Scrum, we talk about MVP, which is minimum viable product, but in this case, we are talking about minimum viable process. So we're going to really kind of tailor that towards your specific service management process, be it as a process design or a process improvement. The rest of the things remain the same. You need to understand to look at 2 to 4 week sprint, and we have a daily stand-up meeting where we talk with each other and understand what has been done from the previous meeting, what are we going to do now, and what is going to be the next way. So all the rest of the things are going to remain the same. And sprint retrospective for people is just like a post-implementation review, right? We used to do a change management rollout. We used to actually measure what went right, what went wrong, how can we do it well. So that's the sprint retrospective. So it's really trying to find out what happened in the 2 to 4 weeks of sprint, what did we do well, how was the velocity, was there enough collaboration, communication, all of the stuff, right? And then we do that. So that's the kind of a big picture of how in a Scrum world, Agile Service Management starts working. Now, what we see interesting is as we have sprints, we have something called as a strategic sprint. So your strategic sprint will talk about your policies, your the portfolio of services, like for example on service strategy. So we need to decide how are we going to do that from a change management perspective. Are we going to talk about change evaluation? What kind of changes? All of those stuff at a high level is part of a strategic sprint. And then based on strategic sprint, you come to process sprint, and then you drive a lot of activities. So what we are trying to do is you break down the big thing. So if we talk about in a Scrum board, we talk about epic themes, user stories. It's the same way. We have a strategic sprint, and based on the strategic sprint, we come to a process sprint, and from a process sprint to an activity or a CSA sprint, right? So we are trying to break down the big piece that used to do as part of strategy, then to come to the respective process owners to do that. So we are trying to build, a segment by segment. So we have strategic sprints, you release it, and based on that, you have a thing. So you start releasing after 2 weeks and 2 weeks, and then you start looking at your specific process activity sprints. So we are again following the principle of small frequent releases, which process organically and shorten feedback loops. So we quickly get feedback, try to make those changes and see whether it's working or not. At the end of the day, it has to deliver value, right? If it's not delivering value, then it probably is a change failure from a metric perspective, right? Any other questions at this juncture? Feel free to type in your questions in the chat window. I wanted to actually go through the flow and then also answer this question so that you don't miss any of the aspects that you wanted to ask.
Sure.
Any other questions at the moment?
Questions here. Yeah, let's go for a couple of questions here. Does it also facilitate both the waterfall and agile service management process together into one process?
Well, that's a great question. Now, I'm telling it from my own practical experience, right? Ideally, what will happen is we need to be very clear what is going to be part of Agile, what's not going to be part of Agile. In an ideal world, what will be, there will not be a process backlog or a product backlog. It will be an integrated backlog. It will have the process related changes. It will have the product related changes. Now, in a world of Agile way of working, we are only focused on bringing that incremental change. Now, so we need to really be careful in terms of scoping. So this will boil down to the scoping of your processes. So we need to say which processes will be worth to go to an Agile way of working. And remember the question that I asked, you need to ponder to that question, is this something that needs to be Agile? Or we're not making enough changes, it's still the same way to work it, let's go with that. So it has to be really thought over as to what is the value that you're going to get if you're going to move that particular process, be it process design or improvement, into an Agile way of working. That's the biggest question, because once you get that ready, then the rest of things is much more easier cakewalk, right? So you need to be doing the scoping appropriately. You cannot just do it and get both the things together. You need to segment it and slowly see if that is still worth it to be part of the process backlog.
And Suresh, can you do agile service management in an organization which is highly regulatory in nature?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it's very difficult, right? I'm not going to give you a silver bullet, and we are dealing with one of the Fortune 500 companies, and the problem is they don't want to change, and because there's a lot of it's a bank, and it's a lot of regulatory controls that they don't want to make the change, and they are very specific in terms of legal regulatory compliance. We said yes, but then this is the most important aspect. It's about to think Agile. So instead of adopting a full-fledged Agile way of working, can we make this small increments? So what we did was we took a pilot within the organization of the banking, which is highly regulated, and said this is where we can take about an experiment and seeing whether this actually delivers value. And we did a couple of pilots, and slowly you see the owners, the business is starting to understand there's a value and trying to talk with regulatory and legals as to how they can address the question. So you're getting the buy-in from the organization itself because you're trying to give them something tangible, which is like a pilot, and seeing the value, and then they're able to do that. So it's a question of if they are not ready, you cannot do it, right? And a good approach or a good starting point that we have got results from our experience of consulting and doing delivery is to bring in that pilot and see what is in for them. And if they're able to see some small changes, you can still explore that opportunity. But having said that, it's the organization will have to decide. They are reluctant. It's not go at all. It's very difficult.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, right. Let's move on. And one of the things that I think is valuable from the Scrum perspective is the user stories, right? Whenever we design this process guides and other stuff, we always thought about, okay, we need to follow incident. This is the resolution code. This is the impact, urgency, all of those stuff. But there's no user story. Why would someone want to have that? So it's first time it's trying to appeal. How do you define your priority matrix? On the other day, I was talking to to an organization which is in telecom sector and asked them, how do you define priority? They said based on impact and urgency. Great. Now you tell me, what do you mean by email not working for a single individual? They said, well, this is low, so it's priority 3. Perfect. Now, from your perspective, it's an individual who is affecting because he's not able to access his Outlook email. Now, I ask this question: what happens that individual be the CEO of the organization? Well, that is something that we didn't know about it. Now, because you have refined your priority based on just impact and urgency, you have never ever talked about a user story. What does the priority mean for a C-level executive? And that is where this user story is very powerful, because you're trying to define the way it's being consumed by the consumer. In that way, it's much more pragmatic. It much more delivers that particular value instead of we going by a methodical of impact and urgency is priority. Just to give you an example. So you have to right from the user's perspective in the user's work. What do you mean by a CEO not able to access this email? What does it mean, right? And it's typically started with stick-on notes, and that's the easy way about trying to understand which is important, prioritizes to do that. So it's very important that at least now we define processes with some user stories. We say, how is this process going to be used? And when you start doing that, you try to create rationalization and say how this is meaningful you in the kind of line of business, right? So make sure that whatever you're following in terms of change management, release management, there is a user story to it. And it could be an actor, it could be a process owner, it could be an end user, it could be someone who's just looking at the change calendar from a consumer perspective. It could be through anybody. So try to explain the actor and is on his words how the user story will appear. And now for the first time, you're trying to talk about value in the way he thinks across. So this is much more tangible when you're trying to do agile way of service management. So for me, this has been a powerful way to do it. In fact, in our courses, we ask them to write a user story using a case, and they come across, and then we validate whether the user story is good enough for us to move forward. Okay. So as I said, this is very important, is changing from minimum viable product to minimum viable process. Now, what do you mean by minimum viable process? Now, that's the most pared down version that is to be released as a sprint. So as I said, it could be a 2-week sprint, it could be a 3-week sprint, it could be any of the sprint, but then that has to deliver value, right? Minimum viable process. So it has to have, like as I said, it could be a pilot, so that enough value that people are willing to use it, right? It could demonstrate, okay, this is value. That the example that I talked about in the bank, where they were very rigid, they don't want to adopt to agile way of working in service management. What they actually start looking at is, okay, can you show me a pilot which even if it fails, it's not going to be impacting? And then they look at it and say, oh wow, this is not bad as we expected. Probably we can explore a few things, and they do a couple of more pilots. And then it gives them the feeler of adopting as an organization, right? And it provides the feedback, and it's a very critical component of it. Unfortunately, when we rolled out process guides, we never, of course, we do stakeholder analysis and other stuff to do that, and run workshops. But typically, people just go there and dump it, right? And we expect that to follow because we know that ITIL, this is the way we do it. Now, there's nothing wrong on it, but as a consumer or someone from the other teams, like application development team, where they want to roll out a change here, they don't really understand the significance of a change management process because it's not adaptive. So it's very important now to talk the language where everybody in the ecosystem understands the value in what your process, your tools are actually delivering, right? So the billion-dollar question would be, how much is just enough? I mean, it depends on various parameters. It could be on the size, your appetite, or who are your stakeholders, and what are your thresholds that you are focusing in order to deliver your minimum viable process, right? But that's the very important aspect that will qualify what will be the end of that 2-week sprint. So you need to decide what are the things that you will do it from an incident problem. It could be a strategic sprint or a process sprint that you're going to achieve as part of the 2 weeks, that people can add value. And then you can tie it down to your CSI register, because whatever you have it, don't throw it out. You can put that as a process backlog, prioritize that, and put that in this particular sprint. We will do this part of incident, this part of change, and this part of request fulfillment process, and then try to tell them based on the issues that we have. Okay. So that's the way to look at minimum viable process. Now, whenever you're trying to do agile service management, it's all about spending with your customers, right? Understand the value from their perspective. You need to also understand your suppliers, your developers who are working in that, because they are already into agile practice to do that. So try to understand where they are in the ecosystem. Try to have a common terminology. One of the problems we have is we don't have a same language. When you talk about IT service management to application development people, that puts them off. They say, no, this is only for infrastructure. Similarly, when you talk about agile to the service management people, they say, oh no, I think agile is only for software development. Now is the time for us to have a common terminology and then try to understand from each other's pain and working perspective so that you're able to do that. Analyze a process, a lot of processes that we have bottlenecks, bureaucratic processes, multiple handoff, sophisticated documentation and all of those stuff. Try to eliminate waste. That's what we talk about in terms of lean. How do you deliver value? By improving the flow and removing the bottlenecks. How do you have a common vocabulary? This is very important, because if you don't have your ecosystem talking the language in which you talk about, you're going to kind of perish completely. So it's important to get to that part and have your own self-organizing teams to look at how do you do that and how do you measure your velocity. So velocity is the amount of work you can do in that particular sprint. It's a capacity of work that you can do. And your teams have to be staying intact over sprints, so you improve the velocity. So the number of user stories that you're pushing in for that particular sprint will kind of improve. So you are able to see how you're going to change the way your service management process is being perceived by following all of those stuff, right? So we talked about how to be continuing until happy. So you start with the value stream, and that's a very powerful way to start the things. Do not start something from scratch. You have something already going. Some things are good, some things are bad, some things are ugly. It's okay. Start with the value stream of what is something that you can live with it, something that is non-value added activities. Try to eliminate that, right? And if you look at that part, it can talk about your delivery chain, your code and commit, your build and configuration, staging. It could be anything, right? We talk about strategy, design, transition, and the continuous operation part of it, right? There's a new term that is coming up, and you can Google this, site reliability engineering. Now, site reliability engineering, and it is very relevant to an operation standpoint, is they are the people who are going to monitor that, because now everything is onto the cloud. It's all in subscription. How does it work in a cloud-based environment? How your operations work? Is service management even relevant in the cloud kind of an environment, right? So we are talking about site reliability engineering as a key role, which oversees the kind of stuff. So look at this one. This is an end-to-end value stream, just not about starting, but starting to end. When we talk about ITIL as a service lifecycle, we need to also underlay the entire layers so that we have shaking hands with the respective teams, so that the end value is actually achieved. So that's something that we need to think about. So start with your value stream. That's a very good point for us to understand where are the leakages, be it downtime principles, and then fix those things. So that's the easy bet, and then slowly start improving in chunks. Right? So organizational agility will occur only when process and automation are aligned. So automation is a very important part of it. We're having a lot of talks with people. We're talking about robotic process automation, artificial learning, machine learning. All of those stuff is coming across, right? But you need to still have to fit in where to fit across. So we need to strike a balance between automation and human interaction. So that's something which is very important. So how do you start? Define your vision, understand what's going to be a process backlog, identify your minimum viable process, and run your first sprint. Remember, your first sprint is going to be failing miserably. When we ran a sprint in Philippines, the first time we ran, we were very bad. Now that's where it's very important that it's not a bed of roses. We fail, but then we start learning from there and do that. It's a continual service improvement, right? To do it again and again and again, and then you get better and better and more reward, right? So that comes to the essence of what I wanted to cover as part of this course. These are the courses that is being done through the DevOps Foundation. So where we talk about here is the Agile Service Manager and Agile Process Owner, which is specific towards bringing in agility in service management. Process Owner is the the individual process owner is going to work across. Now, a bit of background on CASM. This is a 2-day course where we teach people, as we talked about, how to be agile, how does it apply into the service management context, how are it applying in terms of the process design and process improvement, how do you get the culture. We try to bring in all the concepts of lean, ITSM, Kanban, DevOps, so you get a complete picture of an end-to-end. And we've got some great feedback from what people have experienced. People said this is something people do not know that exists. So I would strongly encourage you to explore this option of Certified Agile Service Manager for your organization and team, because you need to build your agile kind of the teams. You need to train them. You need to equip them for that kind of bandwidth so that we are able to be relevant to the business, right? And when it comes to agile process owner, this is an equivalent to a product owner. So if you look at product owner from your perspective of software development, we are talking about process owner. So you need to prioritize your process backlog, measure your process design activities, and you're talking very specific, let's say, incident manager, incident process owner, or change process owner, or release process owner. They are trying to look at specific changes, specific part of strategic sprints, or process activity sprints, or CSA sprints, to do it as part of the equation. So the prerequisites for this course is you need to have ITIL foundation, but I strongly expect people to have some working experience. People who are implementing service management processes, who've got knowledge about it. Those people are able to relate to the real-time scenarios. And in our way of working, we bring in some use case scenarios and try to explore them. So we don't want to have a theoretical session, but bring in some use case scenarios and get it done. That's how we wanted to kind of work with it. Yeah. In fact, the last batch we did, I had Srinath from Bangalore who helped me give some of the scenarios from his organizations and stuff like that. That we brainstorm that and give them to the people so that they are able to relate to that real-time way of working across. Right. Any other questions at the moment, Manny?
Sure. We've got a couple questions here, and I know we're running up near time here. So in terms of Agile Service Management and process design and implementation, can you apply Agile Service Management to operations as well?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Now, I'll tell you an example of what we are trying to do. Now, one of the things is we are trying for an operations team. We are having Kanban boards. We are trying to monitor the calls. We are trying to assign an agile team, like for example, for priority 1 incidents. So the way they work is for a major incident. So we are trying to apply that in some of the specific context of operation side of it. So it's absolutely possible to do that, and there is some tangible results that they can look at it. So look at that from that particular business, which is the most burning problem. Take it from there, look at the pilot, and then you can take it out from there on that. So to answer your question, absolutely, you can apply service management in operation side of things.
Okay, fantastic. And I got another question here. I feel service management is CSI. How are they different?
Oh, great. I think that's a great question. Now, as I said, we are not going to change the processes. The continual service improvement, right? But if you look at DevOps world, and this is a discussion that I have, we should move away from continual to continuous, right? That's a huge difference, because gone are the days that we said, okay, in CSI, we go there, we see that if it's working, then you take a step and do that. The stepwise model will have to go away, because in a DevOps world, we are talking about continuous delivery, continuous integration, continuous automation. So CSI is not continuous, it is continual. But with Agile Service Management, we are trying to bring it continuous. That's the key difference, right? And CSI register becomes a process backlog. You process it and then go across, and the process backlog is not complete at all. So think about CSI as continual and your Agile as continuous.
So Suresh, what kind of response have you experienced while teaching the CASM course to public and corporate audiences?
I think first, most of the people that were brought in the courses have really searched for something in Agile Service Management and found there is a course existing. So they're kind of very curious to come in. And few of the people do not have background on Agile. So we spend a lot of time with gamification, like as simple as a candy game to looking at how to run sprint retrospectives through a board and stuff. So we make it much more gamified. That way they don't just get bogged off, in terms of all the content and overwhelming stuff. So we try to build it into cluster and talk about this much more very pragmatic so that they are able to get this moving forward. So it's been a great experience, and a lot of people wanted to have this webinar, and that's why we wanted to launch this. And thanks to Jayne, she said, let's do it. Unfortunately, she's there, but she will resonate the same thing. There's so much of value that we can bring in. And as organizations apply that, we want to focus on transfer skills, just not the theory, but look at use case scenarios, how you can look at your existing process design to improve. So we have got a great feedback, and we really encourage you to leverage that and get your organization benefited. That was our takeaway from the course, Manny.
Great, great. And Suresh, also, in my travels, I've been asked the same question. So I wondered your thoughts regarding linkage between Agile, Lean, ITSM, and DevOps.
Right. I think that solves to the penultimate one, right? Now, if you look at today, every organization is embarking on this journey for a long, long time, right? So do you have Agile protagonists like evangelists? Some people are fanatics. There's an ITSM people who are very much bullish about service management. They're very passionate about it. And there is Lean team. I would expect they being passionate about Lean and way of working. You should get someone like Daniel to come and endorse on that, because Daniel Breston will talk a lot about Lean way of working. So the question is, you have these people in pockets in organizations, and you cannot get rid of them, right? And there's a new journey of DevOps. Now, just a correlation, right? When DevOps, we are talking about Agile people who had moved from waterfall to Agile and now moved to safe Agile because it's a Lean, Agile plus Lean, and now they're embarking on DevOps. But operations guys are struggling because they have still the basic on service management, ITIL processes, but they do not know Agile. So it's very difficult for them to embark on DevOps without even knowing Agile. So it's very important for everybody who is in service management to first understand and appreciate Agile. It has got a lot of merit in it that we can apply into the operations world of it and then embark on it. So Agile Service Management talks about how to minimize wastage through Lean, how to adapt to a DevOps world. So for example, it will not be normal changes, it has to move towards standard changes, because then only it's pre-approved, it will move faster. How do you do that in that kind of a changing world of it? So it's a perfect link to understand basic about everything and how these tie up so that your organization is getting benefited. Let's not fight a war between what is better. Is it the ITSM or Agile or Lean? At the end of the day, it has to deliver value. If it is not delivering value, people are you, me, and all of us are going to be out of jobs, right? So I think that's the key message that I want to leave across. If that helps, Manny and team.
Excellent, Suresh. Great job, great presentation, and great answers. We have many, many more questions, but unfortunately, we've run out of time for today. I suggest that if you have questions, please contact TaUB Solutions and Suresh, and he can help you with these questions and with the CASM course and all the DOI.
And we have, and thanks. Yeah, and thanks, Manny. And as I said, we will be able to take in more additional questions and other stuff. We will also compile the list of questions that we get in, but feel free to reach out to me, GP as a TaUB Solutions. We are more than happy to help and clarify for your organizations from a team. At the end of the day, we want organizations to become agile. As long as you are able to deliver value to customers, we are improving the ecosystem. So this is our high time for our service management professionals to step up our sleeves and then say, let's make it happen. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody, for watching it. And if you already registered, if not had time to watch it, don't worry, we will send you the web recording. And this is our coordinates. Feel free to connect with me. I'm on Twitter at Suresh GP, and you can reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to do that. Thanks once again, Manny, for hosting a great webinar. I hope all of you guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Suresh, and thank you, everyone. This concludes the webinar. Thank you.